We are live. I'm already crying. Like, I really did not want to cry during this live, but I'm already crying. So at least we can get that out of the way first, right? But I really, really need to do this live because I just got like, well, okay, there's a story that I need to tell you that involves my dad because, Father's Day is coming up tomorrow. And it's a story that's just been replaying over in my head for the past few weeks that I knew that I needed to tell it in relation to some message that I wanted to get out, but I didn't know exactly what that message or that topic was going to be until yesterday when I came up with the title of this stream, which is called You Are Legitimate No Matter What. And so that was the download that I got yesterday. And let me just pull up my notes because this is really, really important. I feel like somebody out there needs to hear this. If I can even reach one person that needs to hear it, then I'll be happy. So I think, hold on guys, let me just get my setup correct here. I have like 5,000 tabs open and I can't close any of them because obviously I'm going to come back to each one and meticulously go through them one by one. No, let me just find the page where I can see you guys' comments if you come through. Well, one second. I will put timestamps down below, as always, on the replay so that you don't have to listen through all the fluff. And I'm just going to give myself some time to calm down. Okay, so you are legitimate no matter what. This phrase has been commonly, the way that this has been phrased commonly before that you've probably heard is that you are worthy of love, right? Like you're inherently worthy. Everybody is born inherently worthy of love, acceptance, the human rights to like the everyone has the right to pursue happiness, etc. That type of spiel. And your worthiness is something intrinsic to you that you don't have to prove to anybody to earn. It doesn't have to be earned or questioned, right? This is the message that if you consume a lot of self-help or like self-improvement, inner work type of content, you probably heard this phrase over and over again. And it's great to hear things over and over again, right? Especially if you've been programmed to think the opposite for so long and you're trying to undo some damaging programming done to you by society or during your childhood or whatnot. But sometimes, sorry, sometimes, and this happens a lot. This is a normal thing that is not just unique to this message in particular, but sometimes when ideas really catch fire and they start taking off and then everyone starts repeating the same thing, yes, in a sense, it's great because repetition drives the message home and it is really helpful to most people to hear certain positive affirmations over and over again, to say them over and over again to yourself in the mirror, that type of thing. But there's also another effect that happens sometimes where the original message gets watered down, right? Or you become desensitized to it in a way because you're just used to hearing it so often. And so this is just kind of an unfortunate but inevitable side effect of, I don't know, like language. And it happens all the time. And that's why, sorry, I lost my window. I feel weird if I can't see myself because I'm doing this through StreamYard, but hold on. Yeah, I definitely have way too many tabs open. Okay, okay, I found it. Sorry. Okay, so where was I? What was I saying? Yeah, so it's a normal effect of things getting popularized and things going viral, so to speak, especially this day and age with social media. Once a certain topic or message um, really catches on and a lot of people start repeating it, sometimes the original message gets diluted, and or sometimes you just become sort of numb or sort of like immune to the message. So I am going to basically attempt to rephrase it in a new way in this live stream, which is typically what happens. Like, you'll notice a trend if the more years that you live in life, that a lot of the self-help content out there, a lot of the, like, the positive motivational content is the same core concepts recycled over and over again and reiterated in a new way, in different phrasing for the next generation to follow, because the old phrasing has kind of phased out, or like I said, people become sort of desensitized to it, and that's just kind of the natural cycle of things, right? So I feel like, since the idea that you're born worthy of love and that you don't have to prove your worthiness to anyone, since that's being so overused right now and in a way falling on deaf ears because of that, I propose that we move on to a different way to phrase this, which is that you are legitimate no matter what. And so your legitimacy is not dependent on any type of like man-made requirements. There's no one outside of yourself that decides whether or not you are valid. Okay. So I want to start this off by sharing a story of me and my dad when I was young. That, and this is, there were a lot of instances when I was growing up that he demonstrated this type of behavior, that he taught me this lesson without saying it to me directly, but just by his actions, just by how he chose to act in that certain situation. But this one really stands out in my mind. And okay, I'll just tell it and you'll see in a minute why I feel it's so profound. So when I grew up in the States, you guys know, right? Like, I was born and raised, my parents immigrated over to the States for graduate school from China, and then I was born shortly thereafter. And I don't think they had actually graduated yet by the time I was born, because I remember going to some, oh wait, no, I think they went, yeah, they went to graduate school and then they got their PhDs in the US. So I remember that I was like alive. I was already in existence. I think I was 3 or 4 when they graduated from their PhD programs, because I have a picture of myself, like, at the ceremony. I was wearing the little collegiate hat that my parents got. Um, but yeah, so in the States, I don't know if this is even a grocery chain that's around anymore, but there was a grocery chain called Aldi. I think it's originally from Germany. Anyway, this grocery chain, in order to get a shopping cart out from, like, how they keep the shopping carts together in, like, bunched together, you had to insert a quarter in order to take a shopping cart out. And then after you were done with your shopping trip and you finished loading your groceries in the car, and you went to, if you wanted your quarter back, you would have to return the shopping cart to that, to the group of shopping carts in the parking area, the cart parking area or whatever. And then the mechanism would dispense your quarter back to you. So I'm pretty sure this was Aldi, ALDI. Somebody, like, corroborate me on that if you remember, or if you were also around at that time in the 90s in the States. I don't remember exactly like what state this was, but anyway, so sometimes like I would go shopping with my parents, or this particular day I was only with my dad and we both went to Aldi to do some grocery shopping before we went home. I don't think I could have been older than like 6 or 8 years old max. I don't remember exactly, but I was very young. Um, so I don't know why on this particular day I got the idea that there was such a thing as having a special quarter. I think I heard it from like my friend on the playground that she has something called her lucky quarter. That's what she called it. And so I had never thought about anything like that before, but kids are easily influenced. So I heard probably one of my friends or one of my classmates say on the playground that they have a lucky quarter, or they have this is their lucky dollar or something like that. And then so I got the idea into my head that, oh, I should also designate something as my lucky. I should also designate items as being lucky or just normal, right? So I decided that, okay, this quarter is going to be my lucky quarter, like whatever I received in allowance from my parents. And so when we went to the grocery store, Aldi, that day, me and my dad, I was like, "Oh, dad, I want to use my quarter. This is my lucky quarter. So I'm going to put our quarter in." And then the way that the mechanism was set up is that you put the quarter in to like this space that's allocated for it in the cart that you're going to take with you. So I thought, like, in my 6-year-old mind, I thought that, okay, so if I put the quarter into this cart, by the time we're done with our shopping trip and we return this cart, it's just going to give me back like my quarter, right? Which is not how it worked out. Okay. So the way that it actually worked is that if you put the quarter in, so it locks it somehow, right? So that during the duration of when you're using that cart, you cannot take your quarter out from that cart, right? And in order to separate it from the group of other shopping carts, you had to put the quarter in and it would do its thing. It probably is not as complicated as I'm making it seem right now, but to my 6-year-old brain, it was like a very high-tech, advanced stuff going on here. So I yeah, so that's what my dad thought too, right? Like he never paid close attention to how this thing worked. So he was like, "All right, sure, like, put your quarter in there." And then we were done. We got done with our shopping, and then after we loaded our food, right, like all of our goods into my dad's car, and we went to return our cart, come to find out that you do not get the quarter back that you put into your cart that you used. So you push the cart into, like, you put it at the end of the group of carts, and then the quarter that you actually get is the one on the opposite side. I don't remember exactly, but it comes from a different cart basically, right? It's not going to come from your cart. So and I think there's like a so once you return your cart, it will lock that one into the group of carts, and then I guess the one that's, like, on the most outward cart, I don't know if I'm describing this correctly, like, the first cart in the line of carts, that's probably the one that the quarter from that cart unlocks, and you get to take that home. Well, you can see how this would be a problem to 6-year-old me, because I was like, "Wait, no, but that's not my quarter though," right? Like, my quarter that I put into our cart so that we could use it for this shopping excursion, that was my lucky quarter. So I'm gonna need to get that particular quarter back. I don't want this random person's quarter from a different cart. And any other adult in this situation, I feel, would try to like reason with their kid, or even maybe like impatiently try to just rush them to the car, or even scold them like, "You know what? This is not a big deal. Like, don't make a scene," that type of thing. Or, "I'll give you more money if you go home," right? Bribing, that type of stuff. I don't Again, this happened like when I was very, very young. So memory is not my memory of this incident is not photographic or anything, but I really don't recall in my mind my dad even hesitating for a second. Like, he might have mentioned it very matter of factly to me once that, "Oh, well, why why do you need your particular quarter? It's this." He might have mentioned, like, he might have used um rational reasoning to explain it to me once. I can imagine him saying something like, "Well, a quarter is worth 25 cents, so it doesn't matter which one you get. It's still going to be worth the same amount of money." Maybe something like that, right? But obviously, I wasn't going to go for that, because at that point, I was very invested in this idea of having a lucky quarter. And so if I let my lucky quarter get lost in the system of shopping carts, that's obviously a huge problem in my life, and my world is going to come crashing down. No, so I didn't like it didn't get you would think that, okay, even if the parent was going to indulge the child eventually, or no, okay, how am I trying to phrase this? You would think that in most cases, like, it would devolve into a situation of the child kicking and screaming and throwing a tantrum in the parking lot of the grocery store, right? But the thing is, like, I really don't even remember my dad letting it get to that point with me. He kinda just like, he just took my word for it that, "Okay, that was your lucky quarter," and even though I don't see like, to me, it's not a big deal because I'm an adult and I recognize that 25 cents is 25 cents. It doesn't matter which quarter it comes from, but to you, it's your lucky quarter, right? It means something to you, and I don't have to understand or even agree with that, but I will respect it because that's what you're telling me. This is, like, what I imagine the monologue going on in my dad's head. It's like, that's what you're telling me, and so that's what we're gonna go with because you're telling me that this is important to you, so it must be, and I'm just gonna take your word at face value and respect that, basically. That's how I felt he handled that situation. So basically what happened was that he flagged my dad flagged down this grocery store employee who was happened to be, I guess, in the cart area. Like, I think he was preparing to take the carts in actually, after we had returned ours. And my dad proceeds to, like, convince this guy for the next it felt like 30 minutes to me. It was probably no more than 5 minutes tops, but to me, like, being that young and I also like, I remember feeling very I felt very complex emotions during that whole interaction, right? Because I saw, like, my dad going from his usual calm, nice, gentle demeanor to kind of getting a little bit aggravated. Like, both of them were kinda getting aggravated. In hindsight, it probably wasn't a big deal at all, but to my six-year-old self, it's kinda scary, right? Because it's like, okay, there's this grocery store employee, he's male, right? So it's like kind of that's already scary to a young girl, any stranger that's a male, you should be wary of, and then he's also kind of in my mind, it's like my dad is going against this person, and they're, like, battling it out just because I said that I insisted on having my lucky quarterback. And so I started to really like during that whole interaction between my dad and the grocery store employee, I felt very conflicted because I was like, oh my God, what did I just do? Like, it's because of me, my dad is having to stick his neck out and getting caught up in this uncomfortable situation, this uncomfortable back and forth with a stranger man that we don't know. And so I'm feeling all this going on inside me. I end up crying, right? After but yeah, let me just tell you how it ends. So my dad eventually finally like convinces and wears down the grocery store employee who basically just throws his hands up in the air, out of exasperation, right? Out of frustration, like, oh my God, these random ass people, like this random dude with his daughter that is insisting to have her quarter returned to her, even though this is like way above my pay grade, that type of thing, right? But I think so basically the grocery store employee must have had the master key or something to all of the carts. And he was like, okay, fine, like, let me just here, take your lucky quarter and just leave me alone. Like, I'm getting paid minimum wage here. That's probably what was actually happening. So then I remember, like, my dad, he wasn't like upset with me or anything, but he was clearly like kind of annoyed by that point because remember, they had been going back and forth for a while. Again, I don't think it was as long as I probably imagined it to be in my 6-year-old mind, but probably like a good 10 to 15 minutes. And I remember crying because like I was stressed out by watching the interaction, and my dad was not, not angry, not upset with me, but I could see in his expression he was like very annoyed by that point, right? He's like, he just said something to me like, okay, let's go home now. Like, you got your quarter. Are you happy? But and then so like I was upset and I was crying. But looking back, that was such an important demonstration to me. That was such an important incident in my life because it's so small, but it demonstrated to me how, um, like my dad demonstrated to me that no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, whether or not you have certain credentials, right? I'm a 6-year-old kid at that point, right? I'm like the lowest rung in society. Nobody takes kids seriously. Nobody thinks their concerns are valid. If they're crying, it's just, "Oh, she'll get over it the next day," like that. And this is not to um, fault parents, right? I mean, it's always a fine balance between making your kids feel heard and seen, and then also kind of at some point you have to tell them to toughen up, that, hey, life is unfair, or this is really not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Like, do you really want to spend the next couple of hours crying and throwing a tantrum over this? But it was just so important to me as a 6-year-old to have an adult in my life, the closest adult that one could have, their, your guardian, your parent, not even question or doubt me for once. Like, he never said that, "Oh, that's stupid," or, "Oh, the lucky quarter concept, okay, that's a cute thing that you can talk about with your friends, but this is, like, a real life situation, like, don't embarrass us," that kinda thing. I've never heard my dad in my life say anything about, "Don't embarrass me," right? If anything, like, I said it the other way around to him during times where, looking back, it really wasn't necessary of me, like, who gives a fuck about what other people think? But, yeah, I've never heard my dad say that to me in my life. Um, if it was my mom, and this is, like, no shade whatsoever against my mom, because my mom was playing a completely different ball game as an Asian American woman, navigating the US. My dad was also an immigrant, he was also a minority, he also faced discrimination, but he was a man at the end of the day, right? So it's completely different ball game from my mom. If it was me and my mom, she would have definitely told me to just, suck it up. She wouldn't have said it like that. She's not as crude as I can be sometimes with my phrasing, but she would have, like, it probably, if I was with my mom, it would have 99% with certainty ended up with, like, me throwing a tantrum in the middle of a grocery store parking lot and her dragging me kicking and screaming to the car without getting my lucky quarter back, right? Because my mom's not gonna go out of her way to inconvenience a grocery store staff, like a white male grocery store worker like that. But my dad, on the other hand, and I'm not comparing them, right? But I happened to be with my dad this one day, and the way that he didn't question me for a second and never made me feel like my concern was small or not valid, never made me feel like it was a stupid thing to have a lucky quarter. He didn't even make me second guess. He didn't even question, like, well, why would you use your lucky quarter if you knew that, if you knew that there was a chance of you not getting it back? Because remember, he didn't know either how this system worked. Like, I think we both thought that we would get the same quarter back that we put in to the shopping cart. So, yeah, that was hugely important incident in my life. It laid the foundation for my really strong sense of self-worth, which later got really effed up, as I entered my adolescence, like my teenhood, and a little bit into my early adulthood too. I would say until maybe mid-20s. Unfortunately, I feel like I really got indoctrinated and influenced by society and the schooling system and all of that. But then I think I can say definitively for sure, like, by my late 20s or probably the tail end of my mid-20s, so probably from age 26 onwards, I really started coming back to myself in terms of knowing my intrinsic worth and knowing that no matter what other people say, no matter how, because other people are always going to try to convince you that you're worth less than you are. They wanna get you for cheap, right? Whether it's a school or, a job, especially if you're out here in the job market trying to get a job. There's all types of gaslighting and, mind games played by employers trying to buy you for cheap, trying to convince you that you're worth less than you are, that type of thing. And it's unfortunate that I did get caught up in that. I was very susceptible to that, as I grew older. When I became like a teenager and I started to gain more autonomy, you get into that phase where you don't wanna hear anything that your parents have to say, and so, unfortunately, I did get I don't wanna say victimized, but I got, right? Just like a lot of us have for that period of my time, but I'm so glad that by the time I woke up from it, when I realized that it all just was programming, and it was programming that was done by other entities that don't have my best interests at heart, they have their best interests at heart. I mean, they're looking at how they can get me for free, how they can get a discount on my labor, and how they can keep me feeling small and acting small so that I don't get in their way of their agenda, right? And so once I woke up to that, it was like it didn't feel hard to me to build myself back up again because it felt like I was just returning to what to my foundations, to what I already had demonstrated to me early on in life, exemplified by that incident in the grocery store parking lot with my dad, along with many others in the same vein, but that's just the main example that we're using today. And I feel like and that's another reason why, looking back, everything's 2020 in hindsight, right? I've been doing YouTube for 5 years. I'm obsessed with YouTube and, like, all of social media. I love it. I understand there's definitely a lot of downsides. There's definitely a lot of toxicity involved. It's definitely annoying as hell at times, right? With all of the new trends and rules and just not collective. It just gets progressively more and more cluttered, it feels, each year as the market becomes more saturated and as people start to do more and more desperate things for attention. But even through all that, I never lost my true, genuine love and passion for social media, not only as a creator, but as a consumer. I just love it so much. And I mean, if you ask me why at any point along my journey, I would be able to tell you. I would be able to give you any generic response that most creators would say. But I realized I kind of had an epiphany when I was thinking about this topic for this live stream the other day that it's because a big part of why I love it so much is that social media has pretty much blown off the lid on this whole lie, this indoctrination, this programming that's been drilled into us. Like a lot of us, I'm talking about millennial generation and older, that grew up with when the internet was still in its baby stages, when social media was still in the baby stages, but it wasn't anywhere near as widespread as it is now. So we grew up during a time where we didn't have the tool or the vehicle of social media to show us the other side of the coin, right? So for example, when I'll just use an example from my own life because when that's how I the ideas flow through me the best. When I went to college, I went to Cornell University, you guys know. Um, I was Cornell is a huge university. I don't know if you know, but Cornell has its own zip code and it's in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York. And yeah, there's like I don't remember exactly how many people, but it's one of the largest campuses, or it's one of the largest universities in the US. There's 7 different colleges within the university, and you definitely run the risk of just becoming like a drop in the ocean unless you make yourself heard, unless you have the type of personality that can advocate for yourself, which I did not at that point in my life when I was of college age. So I was very much in that whole like imposter syndrome type of mind fog. I was very timid. I felt like everything I had to say was stupid, that, I was afraid to even meet with like my advisors, right? Because first of all, looking back, my advisors were not very helpful. They didn't really put in as much effort as I feel they should have in order to connect with each student. But at the time, I was influenced by pop culture and society to internalize all of that as like everything bad that happened to me, or um every judgmental thing that anyone ever said to me, it was always my fault, right? I kind of unfortunately, I did internalize some of that as I was, just going through the primary education system in the US as the daughter of Asian immigrants, and so that carried over big time into university to where okay, sorry. So, I'm getting a little off track. So, I'll give you a concrete example. When it came time to graduation was nearing and when it came time to apply for jobs, which I didn't do, by the way. What did I even do? Oh, yeah. I was caught up in some other mess. But anyway, so like when it came time to apply for jobs, they would have job fairs and things like that happening on campus. And I remember I went to one of those and I just felt so stupid. Like I didn't know anything about the working world or what people were even looking for in certain positions. Like I think I remember applying for some random job. I don't even remember the position. Probably we'll just say a consultant at a bank, right? And I had no idea what they were talking about because none of the classes that I took actually prepared me for any type of like real world skills that you would need to do in an actual job. And I just felt like, okay, everyone around me knows what they're doing. Everyone around me knows how to talk about like equities and stocks and this is how you manage a portfolio, like that type of terminology I had never even heard before. I didn't know how to talk like that, right? And I remember like going into this, interview and then completely bombing, right? Feeling stupid. Like I tried my best, but it wasn't aligned at all to like what the job description was. And the people were not unpleasant or anything, but I just remember the guy that was interviewing me, he was like, "Hey, this is a good try," or something like that, "but this is not what we're looking for," or, "Yeah, it just doesn't seem like you have the necessary experience or the knowledge to excel in this position," something like that. And I just remember feeling like, "Oh my god, I'm nothing about me is legitimate," right? Like, I don't have enough schooling. I have 0 experience because 'cause I'm a student, so obviously I would have 0 experience, but at the time, they make you believe, like, that's your fault, right? Um, and yeah, I don't even like, I did internships, but what did I even learn from those internships, right? I didn't even learn the skill of BSing my way in a job interview. Like, I couldn't even speak to what I did in those internships. I didn't even have the skill yet to spin those experiences in a way to make it seem like I could transfer these skills to, the real job that I'm applying for. And so I remember just internalizing all of that and feeling like, "Oh, but this is my fault," it's my fault that I don't know, like, how come I don't know these terms? How come I don't know how to do this? I don't know how to network. Everyone else knows what they're doing, which was also a lie, right? Like some people honestly just had better support than me, right? They had parents like leading them every step of the way, or they had connections with their family had connections with powerful people in those industries already, or there's a myriad of reasons maybe. And some people genuinely were smarter, or they were just very good at hustling even at that young age. And I just happened to not be that type of a kid, right? Like I was very naive. I grew up pretty sheltered. And my parents also, and this is not to blame my parents, but I remember like when I was in high school, I used to this started in high school too. Like I would see my friends getting part-time jobs, like they would be a cashier at Staples or something, and I'd feel like, "Oh," I would see that, I would look at that and think, "Oh, I probably should do that," right? Like I need to get experience as well. If other people are doing volunteer work and doing the part-time jobs and stuff, maybe I should do that as well. And especially since like college acceptance, or college applications are coming up, and I wanna be able to put that stuff on my resume as well. So I remember, like, going to my mom and trying to or going to my parents and asking them to help me, um, fill out applications for jobs at just, like, random stores around town, and they were like, "You know, oh, you don't have to work right now." And I think, again, this is not to blame my parents or anything, but I think if we're gonna be really honest about it, they probably had no idea either, right? Because they were also like immigrants to the US, and they already had their plate full enough with their full-time jobs that they were commuting every day to New York City from New Jersey by train to go to. They didn't have time to after work to like drive me around and try to figure out how to sign me up, how to apply for me uh for some retail job that pays minimum wage, right? In their eyes, that doesn't make any sense. Like, kid, just focus on your studies and focus on getting into a good college, and then you can worry about getting a real job after that, right? But I think, they weren't considering the fact that things were different for my generation and also for kids in America, right? As opposed to in China. Like, I don't know how it works in China, but I come to think of it, yeah, I don't recall any of my cousins ever doing a part-time job. Like, I don't think that's a thing. Maybe it is now, but back then, I don't think that was like a consideration for further schooling in China. But anyway, so I just remember like for a lot of my adolescent and young adult life getting all of this messaging and internalizing all of this messaging that I was never enough, right? Because the entities outside of myself that whose best interest was to use me and to get my labor, to get me to comply with them so that they can accomplish their goals and they could amass their wealth. Those people, those companies, those schools were always constantly moving the goalpost. So, when you're in high school, it's like, well, you're not legitimate, you're not valid because you're just a high school student. You're just a teenager. You're not even an adult yet, right? Even though there were plenty of people who were legally not adult age that were working like 2, 3 jobs at the time. I had friends that were working, yeah, they were working part-time jobs, like, all the time, it seemed. When they weren't in school, when they weren't in high school with me, they would be going off to their jobs and making their little pocket money for themselves. Um, and then by the time you get to college, but yeah, when you get to college or when you get to university, it's the same thing, right? So when you're in high school, it's like you're nothing because you're just a high school student. You're not going to be worth anything. You haven't done anything noteworthy, and you're not legitimate unless you get into a good college. So that's what I did. I got into the good college. I got into the Ivy League, and at this point, I'm thinking, okay, now I'm a legitimate, right? Now people will take me seriously. Not the case. The goalpost moves again. Well, you're just in university, so you don't have any real world experience. You don't know what it's like in the real world. You can't cut it in an actual corporate job. Like, you're gonna have to overcompensate and do internships for free for no pay just to prove to yourself that you deserve to have a seat at the actual real world corporate table, right? Because you're just in college. Never mind that you got into the Ivy League, you got into the prestigious college that they demanded that you did, but once you're in there, it all goes out the window, right? Now you're, like, back at the bottom again. And then once you get out of college, when you do all those, like, unethical, in my opinion, unpaid internships, you bust your ass, you finally beg and cajole and manage to convince someone to give you an entry-level position, which they're doing you a favor, right? Because you don't have any experience, and all entry-level positions need at least 5 years of experience somehow. Even, like, there's job postings out there, I'm applying for jobs right now, so this is kind of fresh in my mind, but there's job postings that are, like, asking for 5 years of experience in certain coding languages that haven't even existed for 3 years yet. Like, make it make sense. So, later on as I became an adult, more and more life experience, I started to notice, like, all of the cracks in the armor. I don't know what the saying is. I started to notice all the bullshit coming out, okay? But yeah, so it's like, and that's the reason, going back to why I love social media so much, is that I believe social media is the one the vehicle through which all of the bullshit, like, all of this moving goalposts that society imposes on us, it's all been blown out of the water, and there's no it like, the lid has been blown off of the pot, and there's no putting it back on, right? Because you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Because now, with social media, the true nature of the world is revealed, and the truth is that we live in a capitalistic society, right? So let's just go by capitalistic terms. Whatever there is a demand for, whoever is able to provide the supply to that demand, no matter how insignificant or how stupid it might look to some people, how meaningless it may look, whenever there is a demand for something, if somebody manages to provide the supply and get money for it in a legal way, assuming, then that is legitimate, point blank, period. Do you understand? So, like, your unique life experience, how should I word this? I'm gonna look at my notes here. Okay, yeah, I have a couple of examples here, right? So, for example, there are, going back to the social media thing, like, there's any type of niche that you can think of, there's an influencer for it. There is an audience for that. There is somebody making money off of that. So it can be from crocheting to there's like literal kids, okay, minors, not even adults yet, who are making toy review channels, who are making millions of dollars a year. And they might be making more even than, let's say, somebody who went to school for 10 years to study to become a doctor or a dentist or whatever. I guess doctors actually make a lot of money in the US, but let's just say, like, yeah, you studied 10 years to enter some respectable field that pays you like a decent salary of, I don't know, $80,000 per year. And by most accounts, by most measures, you would be doing pretty well for yourself. But does that make you more legitimate than a 7-year-old kid reviewing toys on YouTube and raking in millions of dollars a year just because you went to all of this formal schooling and you got all of these certificates? And like, I'm not saying that that's not impressive, but it doesn't make you more legitimate as a human, and it definitely doesn't make you more legitimate under the umbrella of capitalism. Okay, are you getting my drift here? So, like, social media has made it possible for us to say screw you to all of these institutions and like companies that in the past have been able to successfully gaslight and manipulate, really like control a lot of people. And I'm just going to talk about women in particular because I happen to be one. Like, women in particular, they have managed for so long, and especially up until like my generation. I feel like um Gen Z had a better starting point than millennials in terms of knowing their self-worth and knowing what they will, being able to put their foot down on what they will and will not tolerate from potential employers, because they grew up with social media, right? So they already like, they might not even be able to articulate it the way that I'm attempting to do now, but they feel it in their bones, right? Like, they grew up watching people like, I don't know, the Kardashians blow up. That might not be the best example, but they grew up watching the whole creator landscape and how anyone can turn their passion into a way to generate income and to provide a good lifestyle for themselves. So I believe that Gen Z has like a different set point than maybe we millennials do in terms of what determines their worth as a person in this society. And honestly, I'm happy for them. Like, I think that's great for them. And that's why I like people in Gen Z. Like, I always find it really confusing and weird when people complain about the younger generations that come after them. Cause to me, if you're like, you would only be upset about things that millennials, like, you would only be upset about things that people younger than you are doing if you felt threatened by them, right? If you felt like they were surpassing you in some way. So that's why I feel, yeah, I think that's the only reason that a lot of older people, like, I'm talking maybe Gen X and above, like to rag on Gen Z and millennials too. Like, do you remember there was a stretch of time where they would actually get Gen Z confused with millennials for the longest time? Like, they would make all of these jokes about, oh, this is what millennial interns do, or this is what millennial workers do in the office, but it would actually be like quote unquote Gen Z behavior. But anyway, getting back to the point, sorry, I keep getting off track. So, like, you don't have to prove yourself or jump through hoops for anyone, right? Because now even people don't even need the safety or the prestige of a company anymore if they really wanted to venture out on their own. Like, it's very, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's very, very common. It's not impossible at all, right? We've seen countless people do it by this point. Like, it's very possible and doable to become a solopreneur, an entrepreneur these days, or become a content creator. And to like, how many new content creators do we see blow up every year and able to quit their full-time corporate job or office job in order to pursue their content creation full time? So the cat's out of the bag. Like, we don't even need companies at this point. And so the newer generation, they, I mean, I do give a lot of credit to Gen Z for putting their foot down and saying, listen, we're not going to be jumping hoops we're not going to be jumping through hoops like perhaps the millennials or the Gen Xers that you managed to coerce into doing before us. Like, you're going to have to give us the incentive now to work at your company because we're aware of our worth. And it doesn't depend on you, right? It doesn't depend on a company or an HR person saying that, oh, well, your skills are worth 60K per year, but if you ask for a raise, then they try to gaslight you that, well, okay, so this is like a long time ago, but I had a job interview where they offered me the position, but the pay was lower than I would have liked. I don't remember exactly. We'll just say that it was 45K per year, right? So I did the reasonable thing, which you should always do, is that ask for a little bit more, right? So I told them, hey, this is great. I'm so honored that you would extend this offer to me. Can we maybe bump the pay up to an even 50K? And this is an important thing to do whenever you apply for a job or whenever you get an offer for a job from a company. And I think, a lot of people say this is that you should always, always, always ask for more money. But so the obvious reason is that if you don't ask, then you won't get it. So you might as well ask to see, because you would be leaving money off the table, right? If you didn't at least ask. But the second reason that most people don't talk about is that you need to ask to see how the company reacts to your request for more money, which would, in your argument, in the case that you're trying to make, is that this higher salary would better reflect the value that I could bring to this company. So I'm going to ask you to compensate me what I'm actually worth rather than this, lowball figure that you're giving me. That's essentially what you're saying between the lines when you ask the company to raise their initial offer. So by the way that they respond to you is how you're going to be able to tell if that company actually has ethics or not, or if it's going to be the type of place that you actually want to work at. So what do I mean by this? Let's say that the company says no, right? That they're not going to raise the salary to your new request, and for whatever reason, maybe they only have the budget for 45K a year, or maybe they just don't feel like you are maybe they just don't feel like you're worth raising it an extra 50K. The way that they convey that information to you is going to tell you all you need to know about the type of culture or mindset that the company has towards its towards its employees. So if they give you just a very like neutral, professional sounding, objective reason, such as, sorry, we only have 45K in the budget for this role, so take it or leave it, essentially. I've gotten that type of response before, and I've accepted those drops because it's not really about, I mean, of course, the ideal scenario for us as the potential employee is that the company is always going to give us the highest offer, the highest requested salary that we want, but that can't always happen, right? So if the company gives me a good reason, like a good, objective, respectful reason, like, oh, sorry, this is out of our budget, or sorry, we feel that $45,000 a year is more than enough to compensate for the type of work that we're asking for in this job description. That checks out for me, right? I would probably say yes to that company, even if they didn't give me the raise that I wanted right from the get-go. What you want to avoid, though, is the company that responds to you in a gaslighty way or any type of verbiage that undercuts your actual value. So with this particular company that gave me that offer, I think it was just it was for like a market researcher position. And I asked them for a little bit more money. And they come back to me saying that, well, to be honest, like this and this skill of yours, it's actually not up to par. Like basically, we were doing you a favor already by extending you this offer. So it's kind of like, you know, you shouldn't, how dare you even ask for an increase in salary? Like this is kind of comical to us, or this is like the way that they phrased it was that it's not your place to ask for more money, which is bullshit though, because like if you extend me the offer in the first place, that means that I already meet your requirements, right? So if you're gonna come back and try to gaslight me and try to belittle me, right? Belittle my value as a worker by saying that, oh, well, your qualifications are actually not up to par. Even if that were the case, the that would still be on the company. Like, what's wrong with you guys that you're extending offers to people that don't actually meet your criteria then? Seems like you're just upset and you don't want to give me the higher salary that I'm asking for. But if that's the case, then why can't you just say it as a normal professional human being? Why do you have to say it? Why do you have to lace it with phrasing about how I don't actually deserve this much money and how dare I ask for more compensation than what was offered to me initially? So that if you get that type of response from a company, I would strongly, strongly advise you. I understand that sometimes people are in desperate situations and they have to take what they can get, but I would strongly advise you, if you have other options, which I'm telling you right now, you do, you always have other options, okay? There is never a single company or entity or person that holds the key to validating you or your worth. It's all only coming from within you at the end of the day. Okay? Baby girl, I am cooking today. So yeah, if a company replies to you in that type of a manner where they're trying to insinuate that you shouldn't even be asking for this type of a raise, or we're already generous enough to offer you a job, like why are you asking us for even more money? I would advise to turn around and run as fast as you can away from that type of company, or the equivalent situation with a person, right? Like a man that you're seeing, or a boyfriend. Like, no, hell to the MFing no. Okay. Because who the fuck are you to tell me what I do and don't deserve? You, as the other party in this transaction, are only authorized to speak on what you will or will not do, right? So if you're not willing to give me the salary that I ask for, state it in a neutral way, state it in with the reasoning that this is why on our side we can't give you what you want. Do not try to come at me with some type of gaslighting, manipulative bullshit like, well, you're actually not worth this much. So I don't know what got into your head to ask for more money, because, or this usually doesn't happen, right? Like, most people are very happy with this offer. I'm not sure why you're asking for more. Any type of bullshit like that, girl, no. Okay, so I have a list of things that social media revealed, um, or things that capitalism really have proven and have lifted the veil over my head about what is considered legitimate or not in this society, right? Because like these job descriptions, these companies, these recruiters will try to make you feel like you're inadequate, or that unless you have like 5 certifications in some obscure programming language, unless you've won a million awards, unless you've driven like 10x sales, then you're not an ideal candidate. Their goal is always to make you feel like less than and less than. Their goal is to make you feel that, oh, as long as I do this one thing, right? Like, as long as I prove that I'm worthy by working 40 hours overtime per week without the overtime pay deposited into my account, even as long as I prove my loyalty to this company, then I will finally be validated. I will finally be seen as legitimate. Don't fall for it, okay? Because they are not the ones that decide whether or not you're legitimate. Only God, only the universe decides that. And only if we're going to talk in realistic, capitalistic terms, only the market decides what is legitimate or not. So I will tell you something. I will tell you some things that social media has revealed is very legitimate, that these people probably would have been, if they were similar to me, to where they were susceptible to, or they were sensitive to people's um, criticisms and indoctrinations when they were growing up, they probably would not have even thought to pursue their goals. And that's a tragedy. So that's why I'm always going to be an advocate for social media. I think the positives far outweigh the negatives. So I don't remember his name, but there's a gym fitness influencer guy on Instagram that doesn't even have all of his fingers, okay? I think he had like some rare birth condition where maybe he was born with them, but they had to be amputated pretty soon after. So he grew up most of his life Like, I mean, he grew up, you know, his entire life without having a lot of fingers, and yet he went on to become a gym influencer. So he does like pull-ups and everything with the amount of fingers, you know, maybe like 3 fingers on each hand that he has left, and he has thousands of views and subscribers and is doing just fine for himself on social media. So he's legitimate, right? Is there I mean, there would have been if he would have listened to people that would say that, well, you can't be a gym influencer, you cannot be like a personal coach if you don't have all your appendixes. That doesn't make any sense. How can you not have a full set of 10 fingers and be a gym influencer? If he would have listened to those people, then we would have never seen him become a successful influencer. But did that, found an audience. Turns out there are people that are very interested in watching his workouts and listening to his story and very inspired by him. And so now he's making bank, right? There are multi-platinum selling artists who don't even sing in their native language. Okay, Rihanna, anyone? You guys know that Rihanna is, I think it's pronounced Behin, right? From the Bahamas, Behin? Sorry, I want to get this right because we respect Queen Riri in this house. Barbados. I'm so sorry. Did I say Bahamas? I'm sorry. Barbados. Behin? Is that how you say it? Rihanna's first language is not English. That's her second language. So that's like one thing that I always I always was aware of that when I was growing up. I think because being the daughter of immigrant parents, like I was always made aware that my parents speak with an accent and everything. So their native language is not English. So therefore I was always very like sensitive and aware about other people that didn't speak English as a first language. And Rihanna was like obviously, you know, the biggest example of that to me at the time, because that's when she really blew up, was when I went to high school. And there were people that would like forget that English was her second language. And I remember, I think it was like this boy in school, in high school, we were watching an interview of hers once, and she was taking a bit of time to reply to the questions. And like she sounded totally fine, by the way, more articulate than I would say at least half the native English speaking kids in my school. And yet this guy had the nerve to criticize her answers. Like, why is she talking so slow? Why is she giving such simple answers? And this was at the time that Rihanna was still like, what, 19? Still a teenager. So she was not even as proficient in English as she is today. And I had to check him, like, hello, you do know that that's not her first language, right? And she's like, to the point, but she was good enough at it to the point where people didn't realize that that was not her first language, right? So I'm sure there's someone out there who, when she was up and coming, who didn't believe in her and who probably, you know, would try to use that language thing as something to delegitimize her. Like, oh, well, you're not even a native English speaker, so how can you dominate the English music market? That doesn't make any sense. Like, how could you be the best-selling English speaking artist of all time if English is not even your native language? That's not legitimate. The Grammys say that she is, though. Her billion-dollar status now says that she is, and not even just in music. She's a full-on mogul, like taking over the cosmetics industry. There are ASMR artists, I think is what they're called, right? ASMR artists that make millions of dollars now, making ASMR content, audio sensory something. Like, you guys know the ASMR niche, right? It started out as a very, very small niche corner of the internet with lots of people being super judgmental about it, like calling it creepy and sexual and depraved. And like I remember there was this one big YouTuber, like at the time, I don't know how big he is now, but he had over 100,000 followers and he visited Japan, and he took me with him to go visit the YouTube space in Tokyo. And like I remember talking about ASMR with him at the time, and he was like, "Oh, that's creepy. Like, how do people enjoy that, or how can you like listen to that without any shame? It's obviously something as to do with sex, right? It's obviously like something perverted." That was the attitude that a lot of people had towards ASMR when it was first starting out. And now look, ASMR artists making millions of dollars, millions of followers on the internet, even I have specific preferences when it comes to ASMR. Like, I am picky about the ASMR artists that I listen to. Look at me now, right? Like, there were people saying that that's not legitimate. Like, what are you talking about? People whispering and making crinkly sounds into a microphone? That's not legitimate. That's not a real career path. Are you crazy? That's like borderline, alternative SEX type of stuff. This is what people thought back in the day. And now look, like, my favorite ASMR artists, by the way, so I will recommend only two. Sungmook. I'll put her name in the chat. Sungmook is the GOAT, like, best, hands down, best ASMR artist of all time. She has no editing whatsoever in her videos. They're very, very, like, low. I'm not gonna say low quality, like, not in a bad way, but it's very, very, like, homegrown. Okay, she doesn't have any fancy equipment. She doesn't use that fancy camera. I don't know if she even has a camera or if she just uses her phone, but it's not that high resolution. She is the best. She doesn't do any jump cuts. She just, like, sits in front of the camera and picks a scenario and just goes all the way through. For her videos range from like 30 minutes to over an hour long. And the only thing with her though is that I have slight PTSD because I feel like sometimes she'll be posting consistently, and then she'll literally just ghost us, her audience, for like 10 months and then pop up again like a year later with another video, and she never announces her disappearance or anything. So that's the only thing, like, I have a little bit of PTSD because she's so good. And she also, like, I believe she's the best because she doesn't do that forced whisper thing that a lot of people, like a lot of newbies, I feel, think that ASMR is just whispering, which that's not what it is. Like, the forced, like the hissy sounding whispering, like, if I was to talk like this is how they talk, with so much force and aggression into the mic, as if this is good quality ASMR. Like, no, I cannot stand that shit. Okay, ASMR is not just whispering. I like it when people talk in a very low but still like a non-whisper register. I don't know if I'm making sense. Like a regular register, but just so soft to the point where you can barely hear anything except for like the sounds that they're making in their mouth. So that's what Sungmook does. That's her style. Highly recommend her. Another one that Sungmook for longer videos, and then there's Joyceful Tingles on Instagram for like shorter bursts of, I just think of it as like short little, candy breaks that she posts on her Instagram reels. So Joyce is another good one. Like, I have ASMR preferences, okay, in 2024, because that's how big the niche has grown. Where there was a time back in the day where I would be looked at side eye, or I would be looked at sideways by someone if I told them, or if I admitted that I listened to ASMR, which of course back then I didn't care because I was like, if they're making money, then it's legit. What is that Nicki Minaj song lyric? It's so great. I think it's in, oh my god, which song was it in? It's like they say my ass big, but my money ain't. Something like that. I think it was in Monster with Kanye West. I gotta look this up. Sorry. Ah, yes, yes, yes. And I'm all up in the bank with the funny face. And if I'm fake, I ain't noticed because my money ain't. So let me get this straight. Wait, I'm the rookie, but my features and my shows 10 times your pay. Yeah, this is Monster. If you want to say I'm fake, if you want to say I'm not legitimate, or I don't have any real skills, I don't have any real credentials, it's like, okay, sure, but my money ain't fake though. My money isn't non-legitimate. There's people who don't know jack shit about relationships doing relationship coaching online. There's like 19-year-olds doing relationship coaching and love prediction readings. I don't know what to call them. Yes, this is a dig at the universe guru and her son. Like 19-year-olds giving advice to grown women about their love lives. Imagine that. But they're making money off of it though, right? So maybe that's not even the best example to use here because I mean, when people stop giving people like that their money, then maybe they'll be delegitimized, but sorry, I'm taking my earrings out. They're starting to itch. I got these lion earrings because they remind me of being a Leo. It's like a lion jumping through a hoop of pink fire. Yeah, what else do I have? Other things that people say or that older people, curmudgeoning people, institutions, companies, corporate America, just the corporate world in general, like to tell us, like to brainwash and gaslight us that are not legit but are still making more money than the average employee at said companies. Oh yeah, there are strippers like and this is not a dig against strippers or S workers or anything like that. Like this is me. This whole video is me legitimizing people and hustles that people always get like ragged on by certain sectors of society because, you know, ragged on for not being legit or not being real work or not being a respectable profession. Like, okay, you might think that it's not respectable, but the money is though. So what? So yeah, like strippers, dancers. Yeah, there are strippers. I saw this reel the other day on Instagram of a stripper like sorry, I don't know if that's offensive. I don't mean it in an offensive way. But she's like an exotic dancer and she made a reel about how if you work in the nightlife industry, if you're a dancer, you should open an LLC to deposit all of your savings into, like all of your tips and stuff that you get that you get from your dancing, which I think is a genius idea. And I don't even know like how LLCs work, but yeah, like that's something that you would normally associate with somebody starting a real business, right? Like, oh, I don't know, drop shipping or yeah, like LLC, that's only for people who are doing real business. Well, who said that S work wasn't a real business? If I'm getting money from it, from willingly paying customers, then it's real, like period. And the fact that I don't even know, like, I also need to look into more the business side of social media. This live is also a reminder to myself to continue riding on this train of I am legitimate no matter what. Because even me, like even at this point in my life when I'm so confident in myself and I'm so rock solid on my understanding of my own worth as a human being and how I don't need anyone, I don't need a company or anyone to tell me that I'm worthy. And even if they were to tell me the opposite, which a lot of people have tried before and they continue trying, like the more that you glow up, the more that you get hotter and more successful, the more people are going to try to bring you down. Like that's just how human beings are, unfortunately. But that's why it's so important to start building the foundation, the mental foundation now, no matter where you are physically, like no matter what physical success you've achieved or have not achieved yet, you need to strengthen your psychological resolve and you need to really drill it into your mind that you are legitimate no matter what. Okay. And if you need something to attach it to, so I guess to sum this whole video up in a short sentence, if you need something concrete to attach this idea to, because like some people, you know, it's hard for them to just go off of the whole like vibey thing, like, oh, good vibes, you know, like, oh, the whole esoteric bit is a little difficult for some people when they're in a place where they really are struggling to find their own self-worth. If you need to attach it to something concrete and real world centered, attach it to capitalism, okay? Because we're all living under it, whether we like it or not. And under capitalism, basically, anything that anyone has a demand for, you can sell it to them. And if you can sell it, if you manage to make money from something, then you're legitimate under capitalism. So even if that was like, hypothetically speaking, I'm not saying that anyone should do this. I mean, unless you want to, then I'm not going to stop you if you're a grown adult that can make your own decisions. But even if it's something like selling your body, if that's legal in whatever area that you live in, if that's an option to you, right? Again, we're not saying to do this literally, but you can just run the thought experiment in your head like, okay, if I were to get to a place where I'm desperate enough to do this and it's legal and I can get money for that, then that still makes me legitimate. Okay, it doesn't make me less worthy than someone who's the CEO of a Fortune 500 company because they happen to be born in more advantageous life circumstances than you. Do you get my drift? Um and I'm still like uncovering all the time. I was gonna say every day, not every single day, but I'm still uncovering all the time how many ways, like how many areas in my life that I continue to sell myself short on because of how deep this programming goes, right? Like it was sewn into me at the most formative part in the most formative years of my life, unfortunately, as an adolescent and a young adult. And so it's taking, it takes active, it's almost like an addiction. Like it takes active uh, work to reprogram, right? And even if you get to a place where you feel like your baseline is definitely higher, it's definitely at a much healthier self-centered place, like self-centered meaning that your locus of control, your locus of I don't know, self-worth is within yourself rather than externally. Like you don't give any group of people or an institution the power to anoint you as somebody who's worthy. It, no matter how grounded you are in that new identity, it's still easy for you to fall back, but then also like not fall back into the old way of thinking, but it's more like you have to be aware, right? Because if you just completely let your guard down, sometimes it's like it's very unconscious the way it happens. So I'll give you a recent example. At my previous job, which I'm unemployed right now, but at my previous job, I remember this newsletter that my old company published once, and I think it was on LinkedIn, so they made it like public. It had like my company's logo head and everything on it, but they published a post on Instagram, and it was formatted like professionally, kind of like a newsletter, and it was just saying something about women in tech, um, celebrating women in tech. I don't know if it was a certain month or a certain week in the year, and my name was in there. And I was confused because I saw that and I immediately had the thought that, oh, but I'm not like a techie person though. I don't work in IT. Like I don't work in DevOps. All I do is test the software for our clients. So I'm not in IT. I felt like a little bit of imposter syndrome from that post, even though I hate that word imposter syndrome. But like, if I'm being honest, that was my immediate reaction to seeing my name in that article about women in tech. But the thing is, like, I am in tech though. My literal title, I'm not going to say exactly what it was here, but it was something along the lines of like software analyst. That was what my job was. But in my mind, immediately when I saw my name under the women in tech headline, I was immediately coming up with all, like, my subconscious immediately started coming up with all of these reasons about why I'm not legitimate enough to be considered a woman in tech. Like, well, I never studied IT formally. I didn't get a bachelor's of science degree. Like, I didn't study programming languages or engineering or anything like that when I was in college. Like, I just did a liberal arts degree. This is like, kind of an insecurity that I've held for a lot of my life, which again, still working through. But like the fact that my mind, my subconscious was jumping up to refute this article that was already printed, that nobody I don't remember who wrote the article, but nobody in my company went around like confirming or asking us if we wanted to be put in the article. They just went ahead and wrote it because those were the facts that they already knew to be true, that these names of the female employees at this company, these are the names of the women here that work in the IT field, so we're gonna put them on this list to recognize them as women in tech, like, period. So, it's just crazy how, like, someone outside of me who probably didn't even give a second thought, they would have never given it a second thought because the fact of the matter is that I was working in IT to some capacity, so therefore I'm legitimate, right? Like, period. Even if I was sitting there just doing, data, very low level data entry tasks, if somebody wanted to count that as an IT task, then that would count as working in IT. Like, I don't know why, but my brain was so stuck on this old programming that I had about never formally studying IT, never getting any certification. Like, that was a big, worry that I've had throughout, my whole, I guess, career, you could say, in the past few years at this company, because I always felt like, "Oh, I should get some sort of certification. I should get something to make myself seem legitimate." And there is something to be said about that in terms of just, I mean, if you have the means to do that financially and time-wise, that is a good strategy for if you want to level up your career, like, if you wanna raise your earning potential, it's kind, I mean, it's stupid 'cause the a certification doesn't measure actually what your true capabilities are on the job, but it is something that companies do, take into consideration. So, as a strategy, I would say if you have the time and the means, yeah, go for it. Get certification, go back to school, get higher degrees if you want to, but never, ever, ever, like, don't mistake the strategy for your actual self-worth and your legitimacy as a person or as an employee or as a girlfriend or a wife or a sister. You feel me? So, yeah, like, the fact that I my name was already there on the women in tech, women in IT that we wanna celebrate at our company, like, it's already there, it's already printed, it's already been finalized. The whatever senior person that wrote this, it was probably like a C-suite executive that was writing that, right? Because they were, whoever is writing the newsletter is kind of representing our company in a big way. It wouldn't be like some random engineer that they asked to write the newsletter. So that person already like recognized me without any question as one of the IT workers in the company, and yet my brain stuck on the old programming was still trying to find ways to delegitimize myself. Like, that's how crazy this is. That's how deep the programming runs. But again, I'm just so glad that I'm like, instead of, there are some people who it truly is kind of an uphill battle the whole time because their whole lives they've been fed this type of message. Like I said, for me, illustrated through that anecdote with my dad in the parking lot about how he took my lucky quarter that I had as a 6-year-old seriously as an adult, and he didn't try to, belittle me or make me feel like I was stupid or unreasonable for wanting my particular quarter back and not just taking, the other one from the cart at the end of the line. I feel like I'm lucky that for me, it's a matter of going back to what I already knew, to what my dad already taught me when I was but a wee child, and, it's not, I feel like it's just not that much of an uphill battle as I imagine it would be for somebody who did not have that type of a support in their lives when they were younger. Let me check on my Uber Eats order. I think my dinner is here. Yeah, so I think I said pretty much everything I wanted to say. Um, when I was younger, I used to think that I used to think that I just never qualified for anything, right? Um, like I could never be valedictorian. I always skated by, right? So instead of getting an A plus, I would just barely get a 90 to qualify for A minus. I did get A pluses like here and there sometimes, but in my mind though, the grades that stuck out to me were the A minuses, right? So I made that my identity for a long time. Like I'm never fully legitimate. I'm never fully in the green. I'm always like I barely make it there or I make it there by luck. Oh, that was a huge thing with me too. My first job here in Japan. So I was introduced by someone from this intensive I took this intensive Japanese language program for 10 months and then somebody from a Japanese company that recruited from that Japanese program in the past came to the school to find the next person that they wanted to hire. And so I happened to be like the only person that went for it that decided to apply. And so I ended up getting the job, but like they told me my boss told me that, "Oh, well, we were having a conversation, like, much later on. I think I no longer worked there even, but I think I asked her for a reference letter for a future job. Anyway, this is nothing against her, but I distinctly remember her saying to me, um, when we caught up with that conversation later that, "Oh, well, you didn't really get that job though. Like, they were already going to give it to you no matter what no matter what you did in the interview." Sorry. Like, she made it seem as if yeah, she basically was saying that, "Well, we were planning to hire you anyway or because like first of all you were the only person who applied and second of all we already set aside the budget and it was already decided that we were going to hire somebody from that Japanese language program because they were specifically looking for someone who was a native English speaker who had a very high level of Japanese ability, right? And so like so many incidents throughout my life, again, this is nothing against her. Like I have very high a very high view of that particular female boss, by the way. But when she said that to me, like it was a continuation of a pattern in my life where I always thought that okay, so everything I do is always just because I managed to skate by, like I managed to qualify for something by the skin of my teeth. So I'm not like, instead of the A students who are able to score solid A's like 95s or 96s on a test out of 100, I would only be able to do like 90, right? I would just barely make the A benchmark. Or like yeah, like when I got into Cornell University, I felt that's a big feat, okay? Like, I'm sorry, not everybody gets into an Ivy League, but at the time, I went to a really competitive high school. And so it was a given that most of the people in my class, like most of my peers, were going to get into really good schools, right? And so, like, there was one kid I remember in my class who applied to every single Ivy League school. I don't even know how many there are. How many Ivy Leagues? Eight Ivy League schools. So there was one kid who applied to eight, which good for him. But I took all of those things that were happening around me as proof that, oh, well, I'm just not that special. Like, no matter what I do, it's not that special, right? Even if I manage to get into an Ivy League school, it's not that special compared to everyone else in my competitive school who was also probably going to get into either an Ivy League or an equally highly regarded college in the United States. And so, like, I remember when I applied for Cornell University, I opted for the early admissions process because number one, your chances of getting in are higher if you apply through is it called early admissions? I don't remember the exact name, and I don't know if that's how it is today, but the condition for you applying early is that you had to give them a guaranteed yes if they gave you an offer to go to Cornell. So if I applied if I didn't apply for early admissions, if I just did a regular application, then I would be allowed to apply to several other colleges. And then, like, let's say I get into Cornell and 2 other colleges, I would be able to choose between those 3, right? But if you decide to apply early admissions to Cornell, they give you the a slight advantage over the kids that apply regular admission, but the trade-off is that you have to accept going to Cornell. You have to accept the admission to Cornell. You have to say no. Like, you can't even apply to other colleges. And so I did that because I felt like, okay, well, honestly, like, looking back, I don't regret anything, right? I think it was a smart choice, but the that like if I were to go back in time and if I wanted to make sure that I got into an Ivy League, I would do the same thing with the early admissions process, but I would not have the same thought process that I had at the time. So at the time, I thought that, oh, I have to do this because I don't have the ability to get into an Ivy League with regular admissions. Like, I'm I'm an A minus student, not an A student, right? So I need to do early admissions to give me that slight 2% or whatever edge over the other applicants. Otherwise, I would not be able to get in. Like, this school would never accept me if I applied regular admissions, which is okay. Like, you know, whether they would have or not, we will never know because I can't go back and redo that. But the point is that that is not a healthy way. That is not a um, thought process that is rooted in a healthy self concept, right? Like, if I were to think anything of it, I should have just thought about it as, again, strategy. Like, okay, well, if I don't want to like stress over applying to 10 different schools and then, you know, having to wait with bated breath for the response from each one. And then maybe I won't even get into an Ivy League like my mom so desperately wanted for me. Then if the easy way to kind of maybe avoid that is to do early admissions, then I'll do early admissions to make my life easier, okay? Not because I am not good enough to apply regular admissions, right? You see how the story that you attach to things changes the entire experience? I should not have been attaching that type of a story to my decision to apply early to Cornell. Um, and yeah, that mentality, would carry out through, like, a lot of my adult life. So, for example, I was just telling you about my first job in Japan. I thought that, oh, and, you know, it was said to me directly by my old boss, right? She kinda told me, like, not in a mean way, but she was like, "Hey, well, you know, that job was already yours from the beginning because you were the only one that applied, so pretty much, like, anything that you did, as long as you proved that you were a human in the interview, it didn't matter, right? Even if your answers were bad, even if your interview process was not impressive, they still would have accepted you because that was the plan from the beginning. And, like, that's fine, you know? If she's telling the truth, that's fine, but that still should not have impacted my self-concept of myself. You understand? But at the time, I took it as like, oh, okay, yeah, of course, because on my own merits, on my own skills, I could never get um a job this prestigious, which it wasn't even that prestigious. Like, looking back, this is the thing. When you break free of this mindset, you realize that everything is BS, okay? Like, things are anything that is valuable or deemed as valuable is all perception. That all value is perception, right? Isn't that what they say in business? And, like, yes, if you want to talk about it in concrete terms, okay, so the ones that, you know, the brands or the companies that are able to generate money, the ones that are good at advertising or good at building like a cult following in their customer base, like Apple products, for example, fine, you could say that, yeah, the monetary value is high, so that means that it proves that they're winning at the game, basically, in this they're winning at the capitalism game, right? For sure. But, does it mean that Apple is more legitimate than somebody else's idea for an electronics goods manufacturer? No, it doesn't mean that it's more legitimate. It just means that it happens to be the one that's trending right now, right? But anyway, so, yeah, and I kept that mindset, unfortunately, through a lot of, like, my subsequent jobs even. Even, like, looking back, it's so crazy because I realized, like, none of them were anything special, okay? A job is a job is a job, and it's not like any of them were amazing had amazing benefits or pay or anything, but somehow I was always made to feel like I was just lucky to get them, right? Like nothing that I did was on my own merit. It was all because some I had the right connection or I was in the right place at the right time. But the thing is, that is literally how it works for so many people in the world. Like, as I got older and I changed careers more, and then COVID happened. And so then I was awakened to the idea that, oh, situational things like world events also have a huge bearing on how certain periods of your life turn out. And it again, it has nothing to do with your worthiness or your legitimacy, right? It just happens to be that the world shut down for an entire year more in some countries, and so that made it difficult for people in certain industries to find employment for that period of time. Like, does that mean that they were less legitimate during COVID? No, it just means that the state of the economy went to shit because of people being locked into their homes for the better part of a year. And so, yeah, I finally like the last time that I'm making a vow to myself that the last time I think about myself, that I think about the opportunities that I get in that way, it ends with what I thought when I got my last job, this previous one that I just quit. Because even when I got that job, I was still running this freaking stupid story in my head that I got lucky that, oh, well, I didn't really have to try for this job because somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn for it. And like the person that reached out to me, he was part of the company already, but I think he was getting, so I found out later after I joined the company that they were running this like bonus incentive for people who could bring in new employees. It was still a relatively a startup company by that point, and so they were looking to expand their Tokyo office, right? So in my mind, I was thinking, because I was coming out of kind of like a crappy job that I had to take to tide me over for the COVID years, and then somebody, yeah, like an employee from that company inboxed me on LinkedIn and asked me to apply for one of their positions. Like I didn't even find the job listing on my own, and so I got the job, and I caught myself like thinking to myself again that, oh, this is just pure luck, this person found me. But like no, I mean, it is pure luck, but maybe it's pure luck for the company, not me, because they were so desperate for somebody to work for them that they had their own employees. They had to incentivize and bribe their own employees who were not even part of an actual internal HR team, right? They weren't even part, like they didn't even have an internal recruitment team at that time. They were just asking any employee of theirs to bring in new talent. And so how does that translate to me being the lucky one? No, it's the freaking company that's the lucky one, that one of their employees was able to find such an amazing, qualified, skilled bilingual person such as myself. Like, you need to flip the script on these motherfuckers, okay? Anytime that they try to make it seem like they're the ones doing you a favor, no, you are doing everyone a favor by existing on this planet. And if I'm fake, then my money ain't. Okay. I'm gonna go eat my dinner now. I'm losing my voice. And yeah, if you want me to talk about other topics, please leave them in the comments below. I was thinking of doing a live stream about the Universe Guru fiasco, like the Reddit subreddit, which you trust and believe I'm following every single post and comment on that thing. Because at this point, it's just like it's my free entertainment, But I don't really I don't have much to say about it, and I don't want that woman to come after my channel that I spent the past 5-6 years of my life building up. So yeah. Because you know how YouTube be with the I wouldn't put it past her to try and put a strike on my channel or Laura's channel if we say anything else about her. Like, even if it was unwarranted or unfounded, I feel like YouTube doesn't have a good track record with clearing out strike attempts on, especially with regards to channels that have less, like smaller channels with less subscribers, such as mine. Because I feel like there's a lot of instances where people get where people get wrongly striked, but then YouTube just, like, automatically goes with it, and they temporarily can't access their account, and they cannot get a hold of anyone at YouTube to reinstate their account. So I feel like, yeah, I don't know. Unless you have a direct connect to somebody in YouTube, it's they don't have a good track record of checking to see whether or not the copyright strike attempts are legitimate. Like, a lot of times they'll just wrongfully shut down smaller creators' channels because somebody wanted to be a bully. And yeah, but I don't know. Maybe I'll come online and burn her books. Like, I actually want to do that. The only concern I have is that would that set off the smoke detector in my house? Like, I don't know. I feel like burning a book could potentially turn into a disaster, right? I was thinking of doing it like I could get a bucket and do it in my bathtub filled with water in case anything happens. But even then, I don't know because it's a book. It's like I don't have it with me now, but if you just take this notebook, it's not like one piece of paper would be a different story, right? You just burn it, it's fine. But a whole book, it would be like the entire stack of papers all aflame at the same time. Yeah, I feel like that would potentially be hazardous. But anyway, let me know if you want me to do that or if you want me to talk about the subreddit. I know that people were complaining about my rambling in my last video, so maybe I'll just keep it short this time. But anyway, I'll see you later. Bye. You are legitimate no matter what. There are people that sell feet pics online and get money. Like, how do I turn this off? Oh.